VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many who want to put COVID-19 in the ash bin of history. I would like to see it really go, by the wayside, but it's critical for information to come out regarding this, as we saw a government that became very authoritarian, enforcing shots on so many individuals. I mean, this experience has brought many to a new level of distrust and skepticism as it relates to vaccinations and now the increased use of mRNA. Recently, a former senior advisor to Dr. Anthony Fauci was indicted regarding his alleged effort to hide records about the origins of COVID-19, and recently testifying before Congress, a whistleblower from the CIA with giving testimony of a cover-up by Dr. Fauci and the intelligence community. Meanwhile, there have been expressed concerns over some who have concerns over these new pandemics and development of new mRNA RNA shots. And when it comes to all of this, friends, there's just a growing grassroots effort calling for the fact that we must have informed consent. And sadly, Florida legislators just killed such a measure in special session. Some states are actively taking action to remove any exemptions from vaccinations, and other states are trying to do workarounds. As a federal government has changed things, through RFK and what shots are important, the vaccination schedule. Well, many states are now doing a workaround, that which they have normally gone to. And friends, there is so much that's unfolding, and so we've invited our guests to come on today to tie up so many of these loose ends. Barbara Loe Fisher back with us, president of the National Vaccine Information Center. They're a nonprofit charity that she co-founded with parents of DPT vaccine-injured children back in 1982. They're a national grassroots movement and a public information campaign to institute vaccine safety reforms and inform consent protections in the public health system. She has researched and analyzed and publicly articulated the major issues involved in the science, the policy, the law, ethics, and politics of vaccination to become one of the world's leading non-medical consumer advocacy experts on the subject. And Barbara, so nice to have you back here on the program.
Well, thank you. There, as you said in your intro, there's really so much that is happening, and certainly a federal grand jury, Maryland federal grand jury indictment of David Morenz, who was a high official under Fauci at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases from 2006 to 2022. The fact that he has been indicted with 5 counts, criminal counts, destruction and falsification of records in a federal investigation, concealment of federal records, aiding and abetting. If he is convicted on all these counts, he will go to prison for a substantial period of time. Now, of course, he has to be tried. He has to be tried, and he has to be found guilty. If he is guilty, then he faces. This is. I don't remember in my career. I do not remember ever having this level of criminal indictment. And this is all revolved around the fact that the government did not tell us the truth about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, about its origins, which it's become quite clear that the origin was a biohazard lab in China, that we did fund that this research, gain-of-function research into this coronavirus resulted in a pandemic that took out a lot of people. The spike protein that is associated with this viral infection has caused a lot of damage, just like the vaccine. The mRNA, most people got the mRNA product that was marketed by Pfizer and Moderna. This is a totally different technology that has never been used before on a mass basis. And that shot, I call it a cell disruptor, gene disruptor, biological. It was labeled a vaccine, but it's not really a vaccine in the traditional sense. It causes your body to become a manufacturer of synthetic spike protein. And that's why this is so serious, that people in government appear to have covered up the toxicity of this vaccine starting soon after it was distributed in 2020, but certainly by 2021, they knew that there was an increase in heart inflammation, brain inflammation. This spike protein, synthetic spike protein associated with the biological, did not leave the body as they told us that it did. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty serious what's going on, and I applaud Senator Johnson for not giving up and continue to hold these investigative hearings to bring these whistleblowers forward to tell the truth about what happened.
And I'm going to play a clip in just a moment from James Erdman III on this, but doesn't these indictments against this former senior advisor to Dr. Fauci, doesn't this also have some implications for Dr. Fauci himself?
I would think it does. I know that Rand Paul feels very strongly about it. He's not going to let it go, what Fauci did, because Fauci was the main spokesperson of the government. He's the one that was advising Biden and Trump during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm, exactly, and the very things that Dr. Fauci said, he contradicted himself all through this matter of COVID-19. I mean, the masking and not wearing mask, and then first masks are not going to do any good, and then it's double mask and triple mask, and then you'd see him at a ball game without the mask on himself. So many irregularities there. But let me play this brief clip. This is a CIA whistleblower. His name is James Erdman III, operations officer, who just testified last week, I believe it was last Wednesday, before the U.S. Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Here is what he had to say. Let's listen in.
Intelligence community leaders and senior analysts downplayed the possibility that the COVID pandemic originated as a result of a lab incident. Motives are difficult to define given the scope of the DIG's review. Intentional or not, the IC's actions resulted in a cover-up, wasted resources, and a failure to properly inform policymakers. Public health policy would have been very different had the American public been made aware that a virus from a lab in China was going to serve as the foundation for an emergency use authorization mRNA products being mandated by the former administration. Dr. Fauci's role in the cover-up was intentional. Dr. Fauci influenced the analytical process and findings by leveraging his position to ensure the IC consulted with a conflicted list of curated subject matter experts, public health officials, and scientists. This included some of the authors of the paper, The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2, and other public health experts who have been in his orbit for the last 20-plus years.
Okay, so Barbara, we don't know the motives, he's saying, but there was a cover-up, and our response would have been different had we known all this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, had people known that the risks associated with the COVID biological, had the government been transparent about the association with heart inflammation and with ischemic stroke when they knew it, there would have been a very different policy in place. And it certainly wouldn't have been mandated.
Yeah, and that's something Senator Johnson had come forth in his committee. I mean, he has been so instrumental in getting information out through his hearings and testimony. And, yeah, just several weeks ago, he was learned through his committee, Biden officials knew about a stroke risk from the COVID-19 shot. And it certainly would have changed the approach because, they were all saying that, no, there's no adverse events taking place and denying what was coming from the from VAERS, and we know that to be different. And Barbara, when you were talking earlier too, you were talking about the spike protein from the mRNA COVID shots, and I understand now it was also detected in placenta and fetal immune cells, including in mothers who were vaccinated before pregnancy.
That's right. There was a very, very interesting study that was done to look at, I think it was just over 100 placentas. And look at, I mean, it's not just that they found the spike protein in the placenta and fetal cells, but we know that the COVID shot has been also associated with stillbirth and miscarriage and potential affecting fertility in a negative way. But it was about 106 placentas of women who delivered between 2020 and 2022, and they used RNA detection techniques to look at whether or not, there was spike protein and genetic material associated with the mRNA COVID-19 shots. And they found that the spike protein in 37% of the placentas from vaccinated mothers who had never had documented infection with SARS-CoV-2. There was a 77% of spike protein positive placentas showing the protein inside fetal immune cells. And so you see, when the mother is given this product, then as with many things, of course, in the developing fetus, they can be transferred to the fetus, to the unborn baby, as the baby develops in the womb. And they were talking about, they compared unvaccinated women who experienced COVID-19 infection during pregnancy, and the spike protein was only detected in 3 of 14 placentas. So there was a higher number of spike-positive placentas in the vaccinated mothers who had never had the infection than in mothers who were infected but not vaccinated. The point being that fetal uptake of mRNA through the injection of the mother with this mRNA product, there's unknown and potentially catastrophic consequences for human development. We don't know. This was an experiment, truly, an experiment on 80% of the older teens and adults in America who got this shot. 80% had at least one shot of Americans who were a teenager or older. And the thing that really bothered me about the ischemic stroke risk was this shot was particularly marketed to people over 65. And that signal that they found that was talked about was in 2021 that the government knew about was specifically in people over 65. Well, their lives weren't important? I mean, they just wrote that off in order to continue to promote the use of this vaccine? I mean, there's no wonder that most national polls are showing that more than half of Americans, adults, have doubts about vaccine safety, and more than half do not believe there should be mandatory vaccination laws. And yet, what are the politicians doing? What are they doing?
They're tightening down the clamps.
They're trying to circle the wagons, and they don't want any changes. They want to have the status quo continuing for mandatory vaccination.
We're coming upon a break, and we're going to break more of this down into the next section here as to what some of the states are doing, and also dealing with the very important matters that are before us of informed consent, what that exactly is, and this growing call for informed consent, even from the grassroots. So let's take the break. We'll be back in 1 minute. Barbara Loe Fisher is with us today from the National Vaccine Information Center, and Lord willing, we'll have some open lines a little bit later in the program to give you opportunity to ask questions as well. But there's much happening in the states. Be ready to jot down. Barbara's got a couple websites she'll be telling you about where you can track what is happening in your state. We'll be back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, in an evolutionary sense, what do the terms advanced and primitive mean?
Chris, primitive animals are thought to be those that evolved long ago, which gave rise to more and more advanced types. Single-cell organisms are the most primitive, and then marine invertebrates and up to fish, amphibians, mammals, and eventually man, the most advanced of all. Within each mammal type, evolutionists say that the more advanced ones are the ones that are modern, but extinct varieties were hardly primitive. Chris, the whole concept of primitive advances an evolutionary idea which is wrong on the face of it. Evolution did not happen. God created each basic category, much as we see it today. None is more advanced than the other. Each is complex. And that's the way I see it from a back to Genesis perspective.
Visit our website at icr.org. I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Barbara Loe Fisher, our guest today. She is the president of the National Vaccine Information Center, and I know we've got so much information to share today, but Barbara, I do want to point out as we're dealing with this COVID-19 shot that there's a growing number of patients as well who are now requesting blood transfusions from donors who have not gotten the COVID-19 shot. Do they keep records like this? Is there danger of being impacted by the spike protein if receiving blood from someone who's had the COVID-19 shot?
Well, there are a lot of people who do not want blood from people who have received the mRNA product. And that is because, as we just talked about, the spike protein persisting, they think it could persist for a couple of years in the blood of those people who have been given that product. Mm-hmm. And so people are saying, I don't want blood from vaccinated people. And Vanderbilt Medical Center had evaluated 15 cases over between 2024 and 2025. They found that most of the patients, the median age was 17, and that indicates that parents were requesting that the blood given to minor children was from unvaccinated donors. But you see, the Red Cross and a number of associations associated with the blood supply in this country absolutely say that there's no problem, that there's no risk, and there's no problem with blood that from people who have been given the COVID biological. But people are skeptical.
Sure.
And so and the blood suppliers do not keep records of who has gotten the COVID shot and who has not. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's become kind of a controversy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you're going to do. I mean, I've heard of people trying to get family members, unvaccinated family members, to donate blood for another family member. Mm-hmm. But most of the time they're denied the right to do that.
Barbara, on another issue here, we are watching what they're calling the Ebola outbreak right now that's going on. We've seen the recent Hantavirus that spread aboard the cruise ship, and I've seen stories out, no doubt you have as well, saying a warning that these could be the next pandemics, and I understand there's even the developing of a Ebola mRNA shot as well.
Well, most of the vaccines that are being developed now use the mRNA technology. Most of the vaccines in research. The reason that the manufacturers like the mRNA technology is that it's plug and shut. I mean, it's you can develop a vaccine using mRNA technology in a very short period of time. So they bet the whole bank on this technology. The people don't want it. A lot of people don't want it because of what happened with COVID.
Right.
But that's where the industry is putting its money. And so there's gonna be a reckoning here. I mean, and there is right now. Those people, those companies and medical trade associations and academic institutions that are given money by both government and industry in these public-private partnerships, business partnerships that have to do with the mass vaccination system, they do not want the status quo to change because it's a business, and they all get money from it. So it's the people who are going to be able to change this at the grassroots level. Where are they going to change it? At the state level. Why? Because vaccine laws are state laws. Mm-hmm. Anything not defined in the Constitution is a matter for the states. Under the 10th Amendment, the states, the public health is reserved mostly to the states. That is, they pass laws on public health that affect the residents of each state. And that's why it was so startling when Biden issued a federal vaccine mandate. That had never been done before because that's not the function of the federal government. That's not something that they were supposed to be involved with in terms of national public health. They're involved with protecting the borders, people coming into our country. They also are involved with interstate commerce. But as far as public health laws, at least so far, they've been reserved for the states. So that's why NVIC has been on the ground in the state since 2010 in a big way. I mean, we've always, since 82, when we were founded, we've always been opposed to mandatory vaccination laws. But in 2010, we launched what's called the NVIC Advocacy Portal. It's an online electronic communications network, an advocacy network. It's free, NVICadvocacy.org. And when you go there, you can register, and you will receive information, and you can access information about what's happening in your state, what vaccine-related bills are moving in your state. Mm-hmm. And it's important right now because what the states are doing, they're mad at Kennedy. The vaccine machine is very angry at Robert Kennedy because he has changed things at the federal level. When he was appointed Secretary of HHS, he reappointed new members to the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which makes national vaccine policy. And what he did is he appointed new members. He had a much more balanced committee. It wasn't just all pro-pharma. It was more balanced. Well, they didn't like that. Why? Because it's not going to rubber stamp every single vaccine that pharma produces and say everybody's got to use it. Well, the states have followed the ACIP recommendations for decades. All of a sudden now that this committee has done things like remove the birth dose of hepatitis B as a universal use recommendation and said it should be shared clinical decision-making, it doesn't have to be given to every newborn, especially those who test negative. The mothers test negative for hepatitis B. Mm-hmm. So they're angry. So they're going into the states. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the medical trade organizations, and the public health organizations and pharma are going into the states, and they are saying, we're going to pass legislation that says you don't have to follow the ACIP recommendations for vaccines in order to mandate. You can do what you want to do. You can follow the AAP recommendations, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the medical trade groups. And so we've had bills that have been enacted in, for example, Colorado, Connecticut, Maryland, Maine, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Washington. We have bills moving in Hawaii, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont that would decouple the recommendations at the state level, and that's what they base mandates on, from the ACIP because they're mad at Kennedy for changing things up and trying to reduce the 72 doses of 17 vaccines that are recommended for these children now. Mm-hmm. I mean, when my children were being vaccinated in the 70s and 80s, it was 23 doses of 7 vaccines between age 2 months and 6 years old. Now it's 72 doses of 17 vaccines between day of birth and age 18. That is a huge challenge for the immune system, a constant atypical manipulation of the immune system to produce inflammatory responses to vaccines so that antibodies will be produced. Well, if you are a person who can't handle that, well, you end up being immune and damaged and brain damaged.
Yeah.
And that's why we have the chronic diseases and disability epidemic. At least that's one reason why.
And, I mean, this is amazing to see this taking place where everybody was said, oh, no, we have to stay with the CDC. And now all of a sudden, with the recommendations there, the ACOP recommendations, and now all of a sudden, because they don't like, as you mentioned, Robert Kennedy, now all of a sudden we're taking this into our own hands and going state by state to pass this information. And, friends, this is why it's so critical for you to know what's happening in your state, because behind closed doors, they're going to your legislators and trying to pass legislation to have this introduced in your state. And the way you can be informed is by signing up at the free portal, the NVICadvocacy.org. Put your email address, the contact, so they know what state you're in. And when something's happening in your state, you'll get an email alert so that you can be informed as to what's going on. That's really how it works, Barbara, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think what their ultimate goal is in terms of pushing back against these changes at the federal level that are being made by Kennedy. I think what their ultimate goal is that the states can do whatever they want to do. They can mandate. They don't even have to follow AAP, the health department, the head of the health department. This is why it's so important for people to get involved in primaries, in elections in your state. We need to have good people run for office in the states, because the states, when it comes to mandatory vaccination, that's where it happens. And I've always said the courts will not save us. The federal government will not save us. It's the state legislators that have the right under the 10th Amendment to either mandate or not mandate. And that's what the 1905 Supreme Court decision, Jacobson versus Massachusetts, is all about. It said that the states have a constitutional authority to mandate vaccines, even violate religious freedom, violate your personal beliefs, violate your conscience in order to protect the public health and safety. Well, yes, okay, so they have a constitutional authority to mandate. They also have the constitutional authority not to mandate.
Right.
That's the idea. Elect people. We have somebody who is on medical freedom, and particularly informed consent to vaccination. We are seeing more people running on that platform, and we need to support these people. We need to elect these people.
Barbara Loe Fisher with us today, and Barbara, you've been a huge proponent of what is called informed consent. You've addressed this issue extensively, and for those who are just puzzled, what do you mean by informed consent? Just describe what is that exactly.
Yes, I actually made a presentation at the invitation of Surgeon General Joe Ladapo here in Florida in March. I was asked to present to the public health employees of Florida, and I gave a talk on the informed consent ethic and why it's so important to defend. Informed consent means you have the moral right, you should have the legal right to have full information about the benefits or risks of any medical intervention that can cause injury or death. That includes vaccination. But what they've tried to do in public health is separate out use of vaccines from the informed consent ethic. When you go into a hospital to get a surgery, or you go in to really have any kind of procedure that has a risk associated with it, you have to sign an informed consent agreement that you understand the benefits and risks. But with vaccination, they try to separate it out and say, for the greater good in service to the majority, the public health, security, and safety, you must get these vaccines, even though they can injure and kill. And what we say is that and my argument that I made in my presentation, which actually is on the homepage of NVIC.org, the presentation I gave to the Florida Department of Health is on our homepage right now. And it's a video as well as a reference commentary. So references are great. It's a whole library that you can research the informed consent ethic. But the argument I made is that informed consent, that principle, should be codified into U.S. law. Every single state should allow you the right to have full information about the benefit and risk of a medical intervention like a vaccine, and be able to make a voluntary decision without being coerced or punished for the decision you make.
Barbara Loe Fisher with us here today on Crosstalk. Again, the website where she has this presentation, you can just put it on, watch it. It's at NVIC.org, NVIC.org. For knowing what's happening in your state, NVICadvocacy.org. More on informed consent after the break. This is Crosstalk.
Maybe you're on the brink of losing your marriage, your dreams, your health, someone you love. Or perhaps the trauma of your past pursues you into the present. Your life is going to change. Which way it goes won't be decided by your loss, but by the choices you make. At the crossroads of grief, one road will lead to hope and healing, the other to just more hurt. The book, Hope When Your Heart is Breaking, takes an honest look at both roads and how your greatest loss can lead to your greatest gain. It provides a roadmap of working through the healing and loss to the pathway of hope by providing practical steps that lead to peace and wholeness. Hope When Your Heart is Breaking is available for a donation of $11 to VCY America. Call 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Barbara Loe Fisher is with us today. I've got just a few more minutes of questions I want to ask her. But, friends, if you'd like to start getting online right now with your questions, our number 800-733-9829. That's 1-800-733-9829. And again, friends, Barbara's presentation on informed consent you'll find at NVIC.org. NVIC.org. And, Barbara, I see Florida just had the ripe opportunity to bring about an informed consent piece of legislation, but I understand it was killed in special session.
Yeah, it wasn't even heard. The Speaker of the House refused to hear it, and it was supported by Governor DeSantis and his wife.
Yeah,
it was supported by a lot of constituents, but if you can't hear a bill, you can't pass it, right?
Right.
So it was a big disappointment. It was a medical freedom bill. It did include a conscientious belief exemption for Florida. And so we don't get discouraged when we have setbacks. I've seen many setbacks over the years. You keep pressing forward. You keep coming back in the next session and trying, because every time you try, you raise public awareness about the issue. Mm-hmm. And over time, you can make inroads. Actually, in the last 4 years, NVIC has supported more good vaccine-related bills that have been introduced than we have opposed. However, that's starting to change because, as I said before, the pharmaceutical companies, the medical trade organizations, they now understand that they have got to put all their resources into the states. This is why it's really important to go to the NVIC.org advocacy portal and understand what's happening and make your voice heard. That's the only way we can change this.
And I see instead of the informed consent, we have some of those states that are clamping down. I saw Democratic lawmakers in Connecticut pass legislation banning the religious exemption for vaccines that were deemed mandatory by the state. Again, they're overriding their decisions even over one's conscience and over their religion.
Yes, they had. There was a Connecticut Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and they decided. They had already eliminated religious exemption about a couple of years ago, but they're so determined that there was a lawsuit brought under the Connecticut Religious Freedom Restoration Act on vaccination, forced vaccination. And they were so angry about that they decided to pass another bill specifically saying that anything in that Religious Restoration Freedom Restoration Act does not apply to vaccines, so they could stop the lawsuit.
Well, friends, keep your eyes open, wide open, because, I mean, there's constant development going on, and, we're told, hey, ticks are going to be bad this year, and I saw that Pfizer is seeking FDA approval on an mRNA shot for Lyme disease, Barbara, and it's going to be non-ending.
Well, yeah, and I was around when the older Lyme vaccine, I was on the FDA Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee as a consumer member in the late 90s when the old Lyme vaccine, we had a meeting where all these victims came forward and talked about how their lives were ruined by this old Lyme vaccine. Now they're doing an mRNA version. I mean, we don't know. Mm-hmm. We don't know what that's going to do. But Pfizer is partnering with a French company called Valneva, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, for this mRNA experimental Lyme disease biological. I don't think we can call it a vaccine. The mRNA technology is not like the vaccines we've known.
Our phone lines are packed here. Let's begin with Sheila in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Sheila, you're on the air.
Hello. My children never had chicken pox, but one of my sons has shingles. Mm-hmm. He was told that was possible because he had the COVID shot. Is that true?
Well, the way it used to work is all the kids got chicken pox by age 10. And what they got was a more robust, long-lasting immunity. And as they grew up, as we grew up, because I certainly had chicken pox, people would come in contact as adults with children with chickenpox, and they would get asymptomatically boosted. So there was not a lot of shingles in this country when chickenpox was allowed to be endemic, and there was, I think, about 100 cases of death associated with chickenpox when it was allowed to be in the population, and mostly it was in immune-compromised people. But anyway, so now we have an epidemic of shingles among older adults. That's why, and so if your immune system is down, you definitely you could come down with shingles.
Okay. And so she's asking, could it come from the COVID shot? Is that possible?
You mean the shot causes the shingles?
Right.
Only it's my understanding only in terms of reducing in other words, compromising your immune function.
Okay.
And so you're more susceptible.
Thank you, Sheila. We've got, is it Blins in South Dakota? You're on the air. Hello, South Dakota. You're on the air.
Is that me?
Yes. Your first name is?
Yes. Clint, Clint.
Okay.
And what I was going to ask Barbara is she was familiar with, my brother-in-law passed away here. He had 2 different types of cancers, and he had HLH. Is she familiar with that? That's it's actually 2 enzymes that attack every organ in your body. They go rogue, and that was directly what I did for research is related to the COVID infection, according to NIH website, but they never link it to the COVID shot. And it's very rare in adults. Does she know much about the HLH?
Okay, thank you, Clint.
I don't know much about that specifically. All I know is that we have got, right now, an epidemic of turbo cancers. Whether or not that's associated with both the infection as well as the vaccine, or what we're seeing is people who both got the the biological, and the infection are more susceptible to some of these adverse health outcomes. And certainly the biological, the mRNA biological, is associated with a wide range of brain and immune system dysfunction. So I think it's going to be pretty hard unless they do the proper studies to really understand exactly how this product has behaved in the body. But they're going to have to do the bench science to get down to the cellular and molecular level to really understand what the product has done.
Thank you, Clint. Jim is next in Wisconsin. You're on the air.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much for this program. I am actually running for office in our state here, so thank you for this information. I will be looking into it. And I had a question regarding another vaccine that's been proposed. Do you know anything about? I've seen reports of ticks being released on farmland that would make people allergic to meat if they were bitten by them. And I hear that there's Pfizer's coming out with a vaccine for that. Have you heard anything about that?
I actually have, just in the last 24 hours, seen an article of a study that was done. I wish I had it in front of me because I'm trying to do it from memory. I've been traveling, and so I saw the article, and it published in either a medical journal or a law journal. I can't remember, ethics journal. I can't remember. But what these scientists were making the argument that it is the ethical duty to make people allergic to beef and to animals meat because because of the global warming, et cetera. In other words, we need to not rely on animal protein. We need to make people allergic to it through injecting them with this product.
Right.
Again, I don't have the article in front of me, but I have heard of this.
Thank you, Jim. Truly troubling. William in Florence, Kentucky, you're on the air.
Yeah, appreciate you all. This is William. Yeah, I had a son. I have an older son that had to come back and live with us because ever since he had the COVID shot, he's had his heart's been in real bad shape and his kidneys have been in real bad shape. He can't drive. He can't do anything. So we just take care of him. That's my oldest son. And then I had a second youngest daughter that she's had to be on these puffers because her lungs, it's affected her lungs. And me, I've been on dialysis for almost 16 years. And the first 2 years that I took the COVID shot, I couldn't lift up my left arm where I got the 2 shots. So I just wanted to call in for that. So thank you very much for your program.
Yeah, thank you for your call.
I'm so sorry to hear this. One of the things that we do know, that we've known with the other vaccines other than the COVID, is that if you are genetically susceptible to not being able to handle the process of vaccination, if you have a history in your family or a personal history of autoimmunity, severe allergy, neurological disorders, you could be more vulnerable than others who do not have that type of history to having reactions to vaccines. So that's why it's so important to understand your personal and medical history when you go. If you're considering vaccination, you need to understand it. You need to understand the reaction profile, because different vaccines have different reaction profiles and different time periods for within which a reaction is likely to occur. It's not all immediate. With pertussis vaccine in the DPT or DTA shot, it can usually happen within 7 days, usually within 72 hours, the reaction. But if you have something like a live virus vaccine like MMR vaccine or the old live polio vaccine that's actually still given in other parts of the world but isn't given in this country, it can take a couple of weeks. It can take a week, 14 days, or 30 days to have a reaction. So every vaccine has a different profile, and there are profiles to these reactions. That's why if you go on NVIC.org to our diseases and vaccines pages, we list them by disease. You are able to read information about what a vaccine reaction looks like. You also can go to another website we sponsor, medalerts.org, medalerts.org. That is a user-friendly, searchable database of the VAERS database, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System that we got into that 1986 Act, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. You can go on medalerts.org and you can read descriptions of different vaccine reactions, including the more than 1.6 million reports of adverse reactions associated with the COVID biological. So that is a really good resource for looking at what people are reporting, because there's actual descriptions of vaccine reactions. All the vaccines are on that database.
Again, friends, that's medalerts.org. Thank you, William. Donna is calling from Morton, Pennsylvania. Donna, you're on the air.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment to Barbara. You were talking about the COVID-19 vaccine. Mm-hmm. I just want to make a comment on that. They did not have time to do the research on those vaccines because they got them out quickly to the public. They did not know what the side effects would be, and that is how a lot of people, got sick from it or got an ailment from it. And also with Robert Kennedy, they do not like what he's doing because he's looking into things right now, and they do not like to interrupt the system that they have. That's all I wanted to say.
Great. Thank you for doing that. We're up against a quick break. We'll have Barbara comment about this rush development right afterwards. This is Crosstalk on vcyamerica.org. Let me repeat these websites. NVIC.org. That's information and informed consent, NVICadvocacy.org about what's happening in the states, and medalerts.org. We'll be back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Skeptics and critics are always trying to destroy the Bible, but they really want to destroy the book of Daniel because it is known to be a book that predicted many things hundreds of years before they came to pass. Well, the skeptic and critic love to seize upon things like in Daniel chapter 5, where it talks about Belshazzar being the king. And they're like, wait, there's no record of this, Belshazzar. Well, in 1924, Sidney Smith, of the British Museum. He published a document known as the Persian verse account of Nabonidus, and it confirms the statement that Nabonidus indeed entrusted the kingship to Belshazzar. Well, we had to wait until 1924. And then in 1854, another archaeologist named Taylor, he confirmed again that there were two rulers. They were co-regencies together, Nabonidus and Belshazzar. That's why he offered the kingdom to Daniel, the third ruler. Archaeology confirms the Bible.
Barbara Loe Fisher with us here today from the National Vaccine Information Center. That call that we had just leading into the break there, Barbara, had talked about the rushed development of this vaccination, that the tests were not adequately done. Your comment on that aspect?
Yes, it was rushed to market in about 9 months, the mRNA, Pfizer and Moderna shots that were approved or licensed. Well, they were approved under an emergency use authorization by the FDA in December of 2020 and then distributed. And what I found really interesting when you went and looked at the FDA guidance document for industry, you found that the companies were only required to prove 50% efficacy of COVID symptoms, severe COVID symptoms and hospitalization. They were never asked to prove that the product prevented infection and transmission. Nobody understood that. Everyone was told by Biden and all of the Fauci and everyone that if you got this shot, you would not get infected and you wouldn't transmit. It was a lie, and they knew it from the beginning.
Let's go to Blanche in Cambridge, Ohio. You're on the air, Blanche.
Cambridge, Ohio. And the thing I was wanting to ask her is, I don't have a computer or anything like that. I've got a landline phone. Mm-hmm. Is there a number, a way that I can get information about this consent form and what's going on in Ohio with my address, or can you send me something like that?
Okay. Barbara?
Well, you certainly, if she doesn't have a computer,
right?
Because she'd have to contact us through the website.
Right. So,
gosh, I don't know what to say. Actually, that's
maybe a trusted friend she would have can go online and sign up and get the information, relay it to her.
Yeah, I think that probably would be a good idea. Someone younger who could help her.
Yeah.
So you don't have any suggestions?
I have an address. We do have an address. I do have an address here. 21525 Ridgetop, Ridgetop, Circle, Suite 100, Sterling, Sterling, Virginia, 20166. You can write to us.
Yeah.
Sterling,
Virginia.
20166. Wait a minute.
I tell you what, you'll have to call us back. I don't have time to go through it line by line because we're down to just a few minutes. And if you call to our switchboard, we can look at it's right on NVIC.org's website, the Contact Us button. Sorry to have to rush on here, Blanche. Mary is calling from Dallas, Texas. Mary, you're on the air.
Hi. Yes, thank you for your program, and I really particularly thank the speaker. My daughter, born in 1990, has had issues with autoimmune ever since her immunizations. Fast forward 7 years, she recently had her daughter in the hospital and for a virus, and all of the medical practitioners were pushing, what? Your child has no vaccinations? Mm-hmm. We can educate you about this. We really need to educate you. And my daughter has done so much research and, gone through a lot in her life and said she's not going to pass that on to her children. And so, again, I think it's just the push from medical facilities thinking that, here's this person that's uneducated or, I don't know what they were thinking, but let us educate you about immunizations.
Right.
And again, I think it's just a word of warning for new parents and to be really discerning. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, good thoughts. We have Dee next in Des Moines, Iowa. Dee, you're on the air.
Yeah, I've been suffering 40 years. Well, closer to 50 years, 1976 swine flu shot. And I had that, and it was really bad. And I'm still alive. I'm 68, but they told me I wouldn't live to past 60. I'm still here. But that swine flu shot destroyed my life.
Oh, I was around for that time period when that happened, and they never did have any swine flu. It was a drill that didn't amount to anything, and yet there were a number of people hurt by that shot.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dee, and we're so sorry. Thank you for the call. Kim is calling from Caledonia. You're on the air.
Hi. I'm calling because I recently had a stem cell injection in my knee for knee issues, and my question is, you mentioned the spike proteins might be in the placenta, and I'm wondering if there's a possibility that could have been passed on to me.
That's a fascinating question. I don't know. I hadn't even thought of something like that. But I only know that a lot of people are trying to avoid anything that has to do with donated blood products.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the call here, Kim. Something certainly that's worth looking into further there, but there's a lot of skepticism happening as a result. And, Barbara, I see, too, a recent decision from the Secretary of War regarding military members' troops no longer required to take the annual flu shot. And some think, this is going to negatively impact military readiness. What's your response to that?
Well, there has definitely been a huge impact on the forcing of the military personnel to have the COVID product, and they lost over 8,000 active duty military personnel who quit rather than get that shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're having major recruitment problems. The people are sensitized to this. They know that when they go into the military, they give up their rights. And right now, there's like 15 different types of vaccines they give the recruits, many of them simultaneously as they enter into the service. And so I think what they're doing is they're trying to message the new Secretary of Defense, or whatever they're calling it now, the department, is trying to say, look, we're not going to be forcing you to have an annual flu shot, maybe in an attempt to try to say we've got a more relaxed policy regarding mandatory vaccination. But it's the COVID. There's definitely been recruiting problems now in the military because of the forced vaccination of the COVID product.
We are out of time. The website's again NVIC.org, NVICadvocacy.org, and also the medalerts.org. Barbara, you've been so informative. Thank you for joining us here today.
Well, thank you so much.
Barbara Loe Fisher with us today from the National Vaccine Information Center. They've got lots of information on their site. Trust friends you'll be able to take time and visit that. God bless you. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.